Oh, sorry. Good morning. Thank you for coming for this textile talk that will be different than the others in our addictions because a lot of people couldn't come like yesterday for the opening. A lot of artists and we'll do this combination presential that you are here and a lot of artists are in some parts of the world by YouTube. In first, we must talk in English, so we don't have a translation, simultaneous translation. Of course, some it's better than others, but we try make the best. The important is really communicate. It's the principle of textile talk that you share ideas, your works, your reflections about art, textile art. I want to say thank you for yesterday. It was fantastic, of course, with these rules about COVID. And also today we must make you must take care about the rules also, but today it's maybe more easy. So as you know, we combine your interventions in some of you intervention in presential way, and combining also video intervention that some artists or other people make preparing before. It's this. We'll begin or we start textile talk of Contextile 2020. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here in presence. Also, an honor and a pleasure to have you online, sharing and participating on this Textile Talks edition of 2020. I would like to say that this year, in this 5th edition, as a concept based on the idea of places of memory, interdiscourse of textile territory. For us, it's all the territory. It is always a theme of work and a theme of reflection. We are in a textile territory, so we think that the artists, the teams, and all the artwork can reflect on this. We also think about space in a temporal dimension this time. And we think about the places of memory, rescuing them from the past, integrating him in the present, and contaminating the future. For us, this edition was really a challenge due to the pandemic situation. But I'm very happy to say that we achieve our goal, and I must thank once again to the participating artists. Today and tomorrow we will have an healthy informal talk between the presential participations and also the artists which are with us all around the world. So I hope you enjoy these 2 days of talks, and then I will give the word to Lala Dios, who make the curatorial work for this edition of Textile Talks. Thank you.
Well, good morning again. Thank you for being here. Textile Talks, this seminar we are celebrating today and tomorrow, is an essential part of the Contextile Biennial. It allows for the discussion and exchange and sharing of ideas among the artists taking part in the exhibition, among another artists, and among interested people in the public at large. The aim of the talks, of course, is the same, is to contribute to the global conversation about textile art, or maybe shall I say textiles in art, which is not quite the same, as you know, in the frame of the Contextile Biennial objective, that is placing textiles in a context of contemporary art. The topic for this edition of Textile Talk of Contextile is textile territories as places of memory. And this topic will be addressed by the speakers today and tomorrow, addressed from very different approaches and points of view. From the most private and personal, like the body, the clothes, to the collective. From family memories to textile regions, textile practices that historically so many times have been a collective work, not only in the professional workshops of factories, but also at home or in rural areas. So, welcome again. I hope we have interesting, I'm sure we will have interesting lectures, because I know all of them, and also I hope we can have an interesting discussion later. Well, thank you very much, and I think we can start with the first presentation. Yeah. So it is a pleasure and an honor to present the first speech today, which is, I welcome Janice Jeffries. Please, can you come up? Janice Jeffries is a very well-known writer and scholar. She's emeritus professor from Goldsmith College in London. And she will talk about site, place, memory, and the Biennial. Thank you. Thank you, Janice. You can take it out. No, I forgot my water. Your water? Okay.
This one, yes?
Yes?
Thank you.
Can I open for you?
No, this is okay. I'm sorry. I needed, in case I... Okay. I'm sorry, it's in Portuguese. To start, huh? You start here or the... Okay. Excuse me.
No, it's okay.
I don't read Portuguese, so it's a little hard to... Forgive me for the delay. Okay.
Alguém pode aqui ajudar, por favor?
Sorry.
Abaixo do PC. Alguém pode vir aqui ajudar por causa da conexão? Ok. O problema é full screen, que eu não tenho PC.
That I can understand. Thank you, Claudia. Okay. Okay, so just forward. Thank you for your help. Firstly, bon dia, bonjour. Dzień dobry. Yes, so I too want to thank the amazing organizers for preparing such a difficult Biennale just because of transport, insurance, and travel. They've done an amazing job. So thank you, Joachim, and thank you, Claudia, and every volunteer. I also must thank the jury members, because it was quite a hard job doing everything by PDF and Zoom and everything available, but it was a great pleasure. Now, some of the slides do refer to work that's in the exhibition. There's no value judgment here. It's just I put a few in just to remind ourselves of where we are. I wanted to just introduce myself just quickly because you may not know what I do. I do write. This was the first big anthology. I'm working now on a 10-volume encyclopedia of world textiles. Some of you know of it, some of you don't. If you're interested in making contributions, please see me afterwards. This is some of my own work from the Triennale in Hangzhou, just so that I do also make things, but mostly in photography. And my particular interest is in labor, politics and labor. You can probably give an idea. It's people working in rather difficult conditions in the factories in Hangzhou. So let's move on. So whilst it's impossible to draw a linear or continuous history of textile biennales, I wonder as to the value of them in relation to globalization and the cross-influences that textiles has, both on art and architecture and vice versa, as art and textile redefine their relationship to one another, which has happened a long time. So one curator, Hans Horrell, who happens to be Chinese, has been involved in the organization of some 20 to 30 biennales. They grow all the time over the last 2 decades. And he has argued primarily in exploring the dynamics of globalization, creating platforms to decentralize the Western metropolis and the centers of that art world. As part of his curatorial strategy, he has aimed to help local communities reinvent their cities. I apologize, I am a Londoner, I come from a metropolitan city. As he explains, quote, "The subject or topic of the Biennale has to help us understand and re-understand local conditions. I try to encourage artists to produce specific projects for biennales that actually talk to the condition there, and to help the public or publics, because there are different kinds of publics, look at the place where they are living and in a different way." Now, many of you know that we're in a place that has a very long tradition in textile production, both artisanal and industrial. From the manufacture of yarn and fabric, including clothing and household textiles, it is also a UNESCO World Heritage Center. And we also know that it was in 2012 that in order to perhaps emphasize the strategic, geographic, and economic position in the region, it thought its relationship to the different textile industries. So therefore, it has always been both local and international, or what was once called glocal. Many people will also be aware that there were 4 other editions and now challenges that offer exciting possibilities for this concept on places of memory. Many of you will also be aware that thematic biennales started particularly in Lausanne in 1981, and this is one of the reference books. And the longest international triennale of tapestry, as it is called, in Łódź in Poland. And in its 16th edition last year, called Breaching Borders, it attempted to stretch the definition of a medium historically, limited by past specialist rules and workshop techniques. Finally, it appeared that debates, which have raged for 50 years, many more, over terms like fabric, tapestry, textile object, sculpture, were definitely, literally swept under the carpet, literally and metaphorically. A number of complex works reference the global political culture, social tensions, and climate-related catastrophe, environmental pollution, the development of technology. In order to elucidate the work's meanings in the context of the entire exhibition, Marta Korolewska, the chief curator, divided these into thematic sections: migrations, identity, memory, soma, nature, psyche, and dialogue. And this was the Hangzhou Triennale. I'll come to it later. To return to Wuch for a moment, Breaching Borders also made the pages of what is an influential American-based magazine, Art Forum, in the summer of 2019, and in a telling review, proposing that textile, whether in fragments or in waste, can purposefully address the critical issues of our world. We wait, of course, to see the impact of COVID-19 on future work and our experiences of it, whether physically or by memory or by trauma. So places of memory, which is where we are now. Sorry, last slide from Wuch, just to give you a flavor. Me setting up an exhibition, I move on. Places of memory may seem to reference and have similar themes to Breaching Borders. In recent years, investigations of social or cultural memory have become a major field of inquiry throughout the humanities and the social sciences. So how do artists respond to memory and place? There is a small catalogue entry that I've done for this Context 2020, so I'm not going to repeat it here. But maybe I will say the last sentence. Textiles, with its histories and connotations of craft, manual labor, and class, and gender divisions, has become a mirror image of certain communities in the socio-political fabric through tangible or intangible forms of heritage, war, and dislocation. On the other hand, and in conjunction with performance art and subsequently participatory, technologically based, and socially engaged art practices, textile has been at the forefront of hybrid artwork and newly visible as a particular creative discipline, one closely interwoven with the practices of architecture, industrial design, drawing, and sculpture. There has been an abundance of work that references surfaces, threads, and material qualities, and they've had just as much influence on artist behavior as human behavior, as it has also had on material things. Specific materials explore broader stories around cultural identity, and if you are able to read the artist statements in the catalogue, you will find many combinations of ideas in their writing. There has been a deep cooperation, not only between objects, photographs, and fragments of cloth in Contextile 2020, but between people. A dialogue, an intense conversation between national and international artists, textile industry, and contemporary art. Contextile also, as in previous editions, thrives on artistic residencies and the production of site-specific artistic work, and this year is no exception. Now, textile has become that place where new negotiations are made. No longer determined or fixed, the value of textile as a primary source of knowledge, embodying a complex set of histories and practices, invite a range of speculations about their wider cultural meaning and social interpretation. Now, I want to conclude, because I want to keep the time, is at the last sentences of writing for a moment conjure up this question of place with a quote from Maurice Blanchot from Sleep Night in the Spaces of Literature. I am not dispersed, but entirely gathered together where I am, in this spot, which is my position, and where the world, because of my attachment, localizes itself. The concern with place today partly comes from discussions around issues of centrality, periphery, and difference. Where we are now is a place inhabited by a space made a place where people gather to exchange their thoughts and indeed their experiences of making in a world. And perhaps one cautionary tone. And as you exchange ideas, try to gather up fragments of conversations and thoughts that are a collage of nourishment to make tender works of repair that pay attention to our times. Materialized geographies combine with imaginary projections grounded in the human capacity to remap and transform the everyday through evocative actions and reflective conversations is where we are now. The resultant artworks, as we see here, bring us back to a heightened sense of lived experience. More than this, we find practices and processes curated and tended now by others that will live on in our memories and our imagination. I know of one very intimately over the last decade. It is called Friendly Zone, Cabbage Field, in Kaunas in Lithuania. It is an area of 13,000 square meters on the outskirts of the city. It was a military territory from mid-19th century to 1993. As soon as the last soldier left the soil of independent Lithuanian soil, the area became a no person's land, shabby, desolate, and even dangerous for people to step on. A site-specific land reclamation project involving gardening, materials, and storytelling has been led there by Vita Jelene and Ed Carroll, who live in that neighborhood. So the name Cabbage Field comes from the 3 surviving 19th century military structures that were used by troops as pickled cabbage storage units. Now it is a parcel of land. It became a site for small-scale land reclamation, where the subject is not a developer or a public body, but rather an action of local people working from the bottom up to person up, from the settlement of other communities who also were drawn to the site to participate. So there might be a cabbage field in your community too, a parcel of land that is overlooked, dumped upon, and where non-action is a tactic of preparation for its transfer from what we live on to private benefit. So what if our land and the air we breathe could just be a site of agency of people in our respective communities to flourish? Thank you.
Oh, I think I need some help. Well, hello again. This presentation is I'm going to talk about the work of Spanish artist Teresa Lanceta. She does not define herself as a textile artist, but she has also, from the beginning of her practice back in the 70s, has been using textiles, especially woven textiles, as her medium. This is a portrait of Teresa. She was born in Barcelona in 1951. She studied modern and contemporary history, and she has a doctorate in art history. And she currently teaches at the Massana Design School in Barcelona. She works with textile using mostly weaving techniques, but also embroidery and stitching. Later, she added drawing, painting, writing, and video. Lanceta started weaving in the late 70s, when she was still an art history student in Barcelona. At that time, the art scene was dominated by conceptual proposals that very often contained also political denouncements in Spain. It was the end of the General Franco's government. So there was a lot of movement in the society in general, and especially in art. Many of those artistic proposals were quite interesting and powerful, but Teresa Lanceta discovered textile materials almost by chance, which led her to woven textiles, especially to popular textiles. As for textile art, those years saw the beginning of the fiber art movement. I'm talking about the end of the 70s. The beginning of the fiber art movement that was well represented in Catalonia with such artists as Grau Garriga, Aurelia Muñoz, and others. But once again, Teresa Lanceta was swimming against the tide. With her love of popular flat weaves at a time where the new textile artists all over the world were making three-dimensional work and textile sculpture. Moreover, popular flat textiles were considered to belong to the field of craft. So she was a kind of outsider, both in the fine art and in the textile art fields. She often tells the story, which is a real story, that some gallery owners, art gallery owners, bought her weavings to hang them in their own homes, but they would not exhibit them in their galleries because they were woven works, not painted works, not paintings. Since the 70s, she has produced a body of work which is quite extraordinary for both its uniqueness and its consistency, as a result of her choice and her commitment to an idea. She has remained loyal to a precise technique based on the conviction that weaving is also an art form. She's especially interested in the weave itself, in its basic structure, and its soft, ductile materiality, a quality that was also vindicated by artists like Eva Hess, Joseph Beuys, and Robert Morris, to say just some of them. In Teresa's works on the weaves of the Middle Atlas, there is no appropriation. The Middle Atlas in Morocco, her main inspiration, her main interest was the study of popular flat weaves in the villages and the mountains of rural Morocco. In her works on these weaves from the Middle Atlas, there is no appropriation in the sense of imitation or reproduction, nor does she use their forms to give them another meaning in a new configuration. In her own words, she says, I decided to work with the most basic primal aspects of woven fabrics, with their ligaments, techniques, and materials, and also with their linguistic tradition. Weaving has allowed me to understand a universal code that reveals an internal law, transcending physical, temporal, and cultural borders. I was not interested in palace tapestries or lavish clothes made by obedient hands acting on the orders of others. I was interested in the woven creations of predominantly textile cultures, in which manufacture and practical usage go hand in hand. In other words, in fabrics that develop a language as a testimony of culture and art. The weaves of the Middle Atlas have ornamental structures that clearly set them apart from other textile traditions, such as repetitive, non-figurative structures, the absence of a visual center, the lack of clearly defined borders or edges, and the importance of details. The main form is the rhombus, an irregular shape that has no horizontal or vertical lines, a design that is always moving. As opposed to a square-based shapes, a rhombus has no center or frame. It's just a network of equal parts. Among the many typologies of Moroccan weavings, Teresa Lanceta has focused in the most humble and everyday textiles, such as cushions and handiras. And in this image, you can see to the left, two handiras. The one to the right is the original Moroccan weaving. She bought it in a market in Marrakesh. And the one to the left is her, I wouldn't call it version, but her work about it. Handiras are lengths of woven wool that women wrap about themselves like a cape. In Morocco, Middle Atlas Mountains, Beni Warain women, Beni Warain is one of the many tribes that live in these mountains. The women inherit a textile tradition that, when mastered, allows them to make decisions that render each of their fabrics unique. There are some conventions and traditions, but the weavers are free to change things. These garments not only protect the wearer in winter, their patterns, composition, and colors identify the wearers as members of a particular social and ethnic group. Because of the composition and the colors of the stripes, everybody in the village and in the area know if the woman belongs to such and such tribe, if she's married, she's a widow, or whatever. It's a language. From a distance, a handira may seem like a monotonous succession of stripes, but a close and careful inspection reveals a geometry in constant motion, because the fine, intricate patterns contain a wealth of tiny variations that create shifting points of interest. This is a work by Teresa Lanceta, again based on a handira. And here you see the fourth weaving from the left is a Moroccan weaving, traditional weaving, and then you have 5 versions, 5 works based on that. Teresa Lanceta has dedicated many years to explore the language of Moroccan popular weavings. She has had 3 main exhibitions focused on this topic, and in all of them, the original woven creations were exhibited alongside her own. She recognizes the importance of these works, and she believes very strongly that these works are as much art as their own weavings, her own weavings. As I said before, she usually it's very common in her to use like inspiration very common textiles, not the main carpets, but cushions like in this occasion. The first of these 3 main exhibitions was in 1989. It was called the Alfombra Roja, the red carpet, at the Textile Museum of Terrassa, near Barcelona. Again, Teresa's words. This exhibition was an intuitive approach to the formal concept of weaving in the Middle Atlas, to the ornamentation of objects for everyday use as a form of language. The second exhibition was held in the Centro de Arte Reina Sofía in Madrid, which is the main contemporary art museum in Spain. And it was quite unusual. I think it has never happened before, or it has never happened again, to exhibit weavings. And the exhibition contained Teresa Lanceta's weavings and Moroccan weavings, very, very beautiful, coming most of them from museums in France and in Morocco, and they were all weavings from the 50s and 40s. Again, Teresa's work. The chance to present a substantial collection of rural weaves of folk textiles in a young contemporary art museum like the Reina Sofía completely fulfilled my initial intention of contributing to a broader knowledge of this art, which up to that point had been relegated to ethnological museums. Woven textiles from the Middle and High Atlas and the Tensift Plain in Morocco would be displayed a few paces away from Picasso's Guernica. And why shouldn't they be? Actually, some of the pieces I planned to exhibit were made during the same period. And finally, the final exhibition, the third and final exhibition of the series, and the final point for her in this project, it was held in Madrid and in Bilbao in 2016 with the title Farewell to the Rambos. And with this farewell, she doesn't refer to a farewell to the shape of the Rambos. She refers to farewell to a way of approaching the world, to a culture which is disappearing. It's no longer possible. It has been destroyed. It's been destroyed more by migration to other countries and cultures than by economical progress and industrialization. Those weavers, those women weavers, traveled to a new world, to new countries, and they left behind not only their homes and their families, but also their craft, their savoir-faire, that was an essential part of their cultural identity. So they leave part of their soul behind them. Well, I should say that you can see some works, starting with this one, which are not woven. This canvas, painted canvas, and then she tried to erase most of the pigment, and then she stitches in this one also. See some details here to see the stitching. Also this one. This is woven again. And in 2017, she was selected for the Venice Biennial, and where she exhibited some of this series of works, and as is usual in her, also a Moroccan, this carpet to the right is a Moroccan weaving, Moroccan carpet. And that was the aim of this project for her. Some works showing another kind of work, because at the same time, she has been working in the Moroccan project for almost 30 years, but she has been working at the same time in other topics and with other techniques, like this one. For a time, she went to abstraction, but at the end, she said, this is not for me. She calls this woven abstraction. This one. And now I would like to talk to you about the second project, which has a strong relationship with territory also. This is a recent project. It's called The Crossing of the Ebro. Teresa Lanceta now lives in the town of Alicante, and from 2013 until now, she travels once a week to Barcelona to teach at the Massana Design School. And she stays in Barcelona for 2 or 3 days, and then she returns to her home in Alicante. She always travels by train, 5 hours to go and 5 hours to return. The train crosses over the Ebro River, the longest river in Spain, near its delta in the Mediterranean Sea. The train crosses the Ebro not far from the place where the first Republican soldiers crossed the river in the night of July 25, 1938. The Battle of the Ebro was one of the most deadly and bloody battles during the Spanish Civil War. And the defeat of the government troops marked the beginning of the end for the legal government of the Spanish Second Republic. More than 20,000 soldiers from both sides died, and there were thousands more injured and prisoners. The crossing of the Ebro is also the title of a project that was born during Teresa Lanceta's weekly travel crossing the Ebro on the train, because her mother's family lived very near, in a village which was completely devastated during this battle, in the land known as Terra Alta, meaning highland. All the stories her aunts told her when she was a child came to her mind on the train, one week after another. The project crystallized in an exhibition featuring 5 textile wall hangings made in remembrance of the cloth her grandmother used to wrap the bread and take it home from the bakery. You can see the wall hangings here. And this is the original, I mean, it's not original really, but it's similar to the original cloth her grandmother used to wrap the bread. In her works, in the 5 works, there is always some red color or red line because of the blood. There were 5 textile works, one for each of the months that saw the battle. Plus 230 photos, all of them taken by the artist from the train. 115 taken when going to Barcelona, and another 115 taken in the return travel. The battle has lasted for 115 days. In the exhibition, there are also tools from the Spanish Civil War, like you see in the pictures, and 3 videos. As far as I know, the project has been exhibited twice, once at La Trinchera Museum at Corbera de Ebre, a village devastated in the battle, whose inhabitants were forbidden to rebuild the place and had to move somewhere else. Trinchera means trench. And the other exhibition was at the Espacio Mínimo Art Gallery in Madrid. This is from some of the video. The title of this short video makes reference to the, we say in Spanish, the leva del biberón, the levy of the baby's bottle, because in the Republican side, there were a lot of very, very young soldiers with 16 or 17 years, who had no experience at all in fighting. They were not military. They had to go. And then Corbera de Ebre. This has a beautiful song sung a cappella by a woman from the neighborhood. I will later show the link to the video if you want to see them. Because the 3 videos are 6 minutes long, so I thought it was too much. You can see some stills from the videos. You can see the trench. For 115 days, soldiers were living, fighting, and dying here. And the battle could have been much shorter, but General Franco wanted to take the occasion to completely crush the Republican army so that they will never fight again. So it was a kind of slaughter. And this is Corbera de Ebro, the village, which is like that even now. This is a very recent picture. And then the 3rd video, it has a song which is called In Death's Reach. And the song in the video is composed and sung by a Scottish boy who lives in Alicante. You can see it's very hilly, so and here you have the link if you want to take a picture, or you can write and ask me. Okay, and I think I finished now. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we can go for a short coffee break. Thank you. Well, here we are again. And before starting the session, I would like to talk about another textile event which is taking place online in the next days, next week, in Chile. It's organized from Chile. It's a series of conversations and panel discussions about many aspects of textile art. And also there was a call for entries from videos and photos about the process of making a work of art, the process of creation. So you have here the link. If you Google Biennial with the online, you will find the link, and you will see the selected videos and photos, and you can listen to the conversations and the panel discussions via Zoom or via YouTube. For some of the conversations, there is a need to register, but some others are open. And in some time, everything will be open, and it can be seen in YouTube, in the YouTube channel of this organization. The organizers are the organization World Textile Art, which was founded by Colombian artist Pilar Tobón and many years ago, and they organize biennials every 2 years. At the beginning in Latin American countries, but last year they had the first European biennial in Madrid, and next year it will be a presential biennial in Chile. But this year they wanted to keep the flame alive, so to speak. So they organized this interesting series of conversations and dialogues. So if you are interested, please take note. And now we go on with our program. In the next presentation will be we will see the video by the artist April Dauscha from the United States of America, with the title "What We Are, You Will Be. What You Are, We Once Were." The recent works of April Dauscha. Thank you.
What we are, you will be. What you are, we once were. Recent works by April Dauscha. To give my new work some context, I thought I would start this presentation with some earlier works and then speak to some of the research that influences my studio practice. My work is about my body. I explore themes of morality and separation, and am often inspired by clothing rituals, early photography, and symbolism used in the Catholic Church. This photograph is titled Communion, and it references sin, the ritual of confession and atonement. The next 3 slides are from a video series called Custody of the Tongue. Throughout the process of making this series, I was thinking about different acts of penance or punishment. Each video from this series of work highlights my mouth. It's a site of imperfection. In this first video, Consumption, I stuff my own hair into my mouth as a penitential act. While making this series, I found a biblical quote that I felt like fit the video series nicely. It says, "No one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come both blessing and cursing." I'm using objects and materials often associated with women's work or femininity, but I swing between the delicacy of handcrafting a miniature piece of lace to the vulgarity of wrapping lace-making thread tightly around my tongue. Next, I wanted to quickly kind of cover some of the research and inspiration that I use in my studio. My background in fashion design and my love of costume history has really had a big impact on my studio practice. I became really fascinated with underpinnings like corsets and crinolines, bustles. These are items of clothing that are unseen, but they're meant to shape the body. I'm also fascinated with the ritual of dress during the Victorian era, especially morning dress. It was a custom to wear all black clothing, jewelry, and veils after one of their loved ones had passed away. This was actually a ritual made fashionable by Queen Victoria after the death of her beloved Prince Albert in 1861. With Catholicism being such a major component of my research, I ran into this wonderful image, or many images of Mary Magdalene, and immediately fell in love. Most of these show some of the most powerful examples of hair and its relevance to the act of penance and mourning. She's been depicted for centuries in Christian iconography as a penitent woman, and often her hair is shown overwhelming her entire body.
In Catholicism, Mater Dolorosa means sorrowful mother and is a reference to Our Lady of Sorrows. This is a popular Catholic icon of the Virgin Mary, who's seen weeping, and her heart is pierced with 7 daggers. Each of these daggers symbolizes a narrative of loss or pain experienced throughout her life. Another source of inspiration for me has always been early photography, especially post-mortem photography of the 19th century. People would often get pictures taken of their deceased loved ones as a way to honor them. Oftentimes, these pictures would be the only pictures to exist of these people.
Another big source of inspiration for this body of work is that of the Bejeweled Saints that were discovered in 1578 when the Roman catacombs were opened. They were highly embellished and sent to Germany, Switzerland, and Austria to replace relics that had been destroyed during the Reformation. In this photograph, Cerament, and in other photographs in this body of work, my body comes into direct contact with ancestral objects that function as relics. They are covering, wrapping, shrouding faceless forms. They become an idealized ritual enacted in anticipation of one's own death and as an interaction of the living with the deceased. Here, I take a fragment of lace from my great-grandmother's collection, encapsulate it, embellish it, and then ritualistically apply it to my own body. Matrimonial stole is a garment that I wore at my own wedding, and it was inherited from my grandmother. For me, it was a way to have her present at my wedding, even after her death. The two of us sharing a rite of passage together. Again, an interaction of the living and the deceased.
My piece Morning Quilt is entirely held together with pins. There's no stitching. It precariously hangs on the wall off the edges of dressmaker pins. There's a tension here with the pairing of something uncomfortable like a quilt, paired with something dangerous like pins, not to mention the eeriness of human hair being embedded in an object of comfort. The pins surrounding the hair become a visual reference of the daggers seen in Our Lady of Sorrows iconography. My interest in postmortem photography are present in this photograph, Shroud. A shroud is a cloth that typically covers the deceased, and in this case, it is my own mourning quilt. This is my great-grandmother, Mary Leona Sheridan. She passed away when I was 9 years old. She came from an Irish Catholic family. Her death was one of the first experiences that I'd had with death. And after my grandmother, her daughter, passed away, I somehow inherited a suitcase full of Mary Leona's belongings. Most of the objects that I use in this body of work belong to her. This is her first communion dress, captured in mesh to preserve and enshrine the object. In this GIF, I'm using her coming out dress. And coming out is like a woman's debut into society, usually around the age of 16, kind of like a debutante or a quinceañera in other cultures. The GIFs highlight the rites of passage in one woman's life. This is her wedding dress. It is also the same dress that I used to inspire the design of my own wedding dress. These moving images act as metaphors for corporeal weight and inescapable gravity. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, is a piece which uses Mary Leona's wedding shoes. It's both playful and sorrowful, kind of like an Irish wake, a celebration of life that's ultimately steeped in sadness. The frames act as thighs, and the tulle become her legs, again implying the presence of the body. This piece, titled Prostrate, shows the silk stockings lying on their side. The idea of lying down and horizontal orientation become very important visual clues that I use throughout this body of work. These are her silk stockings that I found balled up in the foot of her wedding shoes. They're lying prostrate, encased in antique veiling, embellished, and turned into an object of veneration. This piece, Mourners, uses tissues that were accumulated from a family funeral and are loosely bound together with a hairnet. These objects are lovingly encased. They are a reference to Victorian sentimentality. This was my great-grandmother's teacup that was given to me as a gift from my aunt. After several years of owning it, I accidentally knocked it off the edge of my dresser. It is now precariously collected, placed in a thin veil of hairnets, and hung from my grandmother's hat pin. This piece is about guilt, the need to repair something that is broken, an inability to care for something important, and considers trauma that is passed down from generation to generation. What we are, you will be. What you are, we once were. Thank you all so much for joining me and for listening in. You can find more of my artwork at my website listed here, or you can follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's a little bit strange to hear an artist who is not here. We don't know if we have to clap or no. I was feeling like clapping, really, but as nobody. Thank you. It's okay. We are living a time when we have to get used to new things, a new way of working and living and communicating. Okay, and now I will. Oh my God! I will welcome to the floor to Celia de Villiers. She's from South Africa, Belgium, and she's going to talk about the project Ubuntu and the Ethics of Care, a project she has made in South Africa with a group of South African embroiderers, I think. Please, Celia.
Sorry, I just have to sort out my technical issues here. It's not working. Okay, thank you. It's a bit strange on my screen. It's not. All right. Anyway, that's me. I am a retired university lecturer, and I moved to Europe 5 years ago. So it's okay. Yeah, I think it's better. You can see I'm a bit nervous. Eh? So I moved to Europe 5 years ago, and you will understand at the end of this talk why I moved. But I worked with these women for 15 years. I was asked by a company to start an empowerment project for women, economical empowerment, because of the great poverty in South Africa. And this recycling waste management company approached me and asked me to start a project because they were employing the men, but they felt the women needed some independence as well. And obviously, you can understand that they also had a female CEO at the waste management company. So she realized the need for women to be empowered. And that is what this project has turned out to be. But not only that, there's a lot of other side issues that time. But I'm going to show you a very short video about a previous project we did with the ladies about the freedom in South Africa, the struggle to freedom, because of all the violence and the difficulties of the history of my country. So I will just do that. I hope that it works, because we've had, oh, the sound. There's no sound. Can I stop it, because we had sound just now? I'm taking your time now, but... Shall I just go without sound? It's a pity, because we tested it during the break and... Okay. So this is about lived and witnessed experience of the women of Itwatwa, east of Johannesburg, where I worked with them. And they've collaborated with a lot of academics across continents and across disciplines. And they did these embroideries, and then they were asked to hand it over to some digital artists, 5 young digital artists, who took their embroideries and turned it into the narratives. So that song you heard is a religious song, because during apartheid, people were not allowed to have mass gatherings. So they used the churches as a place of political gatherings. So a lot of the religious songs were also had political implications. As you could see, some of the words in the embroidery are based on that song. It's an English translation of the African words. So every animation artist was given one song to interpret and had access to all the embroideries the women had done about their lives. And that project was done at the 10-year celebration of democracy after Nelson Mandela came out of jail. And it was curated by a colleague of mine, Gwyneth Miller, and the video was made by Kai Lascott and Rebuile Matsuele, 2 animation artists. Then we go on. This image here is about the conditions that the women live in. You can see that some of the embroidery there contains the violence. During the apartheid struggle, there was a lot of violence. The bottom image here with the man with a tire around his neck, people who were regarded as traitors, collaborating with the white people in the country, were given a necklace. A necklace was a tire put around their body and they were set alight. Sorry. So you can see that the people live very closely together. And they were harassed by police. Those yellow vans are police who stopped them and asked for their passes. They had to show their identity. They were not allowed to move around free. Right, the next slide is about our project that we did with the Belgian, thank you, with the Belgian University, the Royal Academy of Antwerp, and Chris van 't Hof, he did the designs, and we worked on the disappointment after Nelson Mandela died. The government just went down, and we had 10 years of very difficult democracy, and the people were very disappointed. We were very hopeful when Mandela came out of jail, but it just went horribly wrong. President Zuma was corrupt, and he appropriated a lot of the government funds, and at the moment there are huge court cases against him. Now, this project that Chris did, he based on 2 barcodes or QR codes, Madiba and Ubuntu. You see the QR codes over there on the little image, and the top one is Madiba and the bottom one is Ubuntu. So there is a portrait of Nelson Mandela made by the embroidery group, and it was bought by the University of Michigan. State University of Michigan purchased that, and it was designed by a co-facilitator of mine, Hester Viles. So the word Madiba is the clan name of Nelson Mandela, and then the word Ubuntu means I am because of who we all are. So it is an African philosophy that is the belief that I am because of other people. And this is greatly what this project of ours has also been about. Because when I came to the people with my white face in amongst all the black people who'd suffered this tremendous hardship in the township, these people have had brutal lives. They've been exposed to femicide, female abuse, political violence, HIV/AIDS, things like that. And I came there from a privileged background, coming to teach them something. And it took me almost 2 years to win their trust. Because of all the things that had gone before, they did not trust white people. And for us as white people, it was important to work on reconciliation and give care to these people, and importance to these people and their lives. So it took quite a long time. And then I came with a mad professor who wanted to do something completely alternative. And you will see that the work that is on the exhibition at the moment is very different from the work they've done before. So it was another question of learning to trust the process of what this person wanted to teach them. And it shifted the embroidery style and increased it quite a lot as well. So these figures are toy figures. Now, toy is also known as the Madiba shuffle, because Nelson Mandela used to do this. He always used to dance like that. And the people have adopted that, and they, in protests, they toy. So it could be a protest, but it could also, it happens at funerals as well, and it happens when the people are happy. So it has a whole array of meanings, and what is interesting there is that it can become a whole different thing from where it starts in the toying. And it's quite an emotional thing, but it's also a democratic thing, because there's no leader. Everybody becomes one. So it's again that thing of Ubuntu, of mass protest or standing together to get things done. And during the reign of President Zuma, there was a lot of trouble, and service was not being delivered by the government in the municipalities, and the roads were falling apart, and potholes everywhere, and security, crime has gone sky high. So the people toy to protest. And that is a portrait of, in the middle here, is a portrait of Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, and the people toying and complaining, but remembering Madiba, who was the father of our nation. Here's some more memories of Nelson Mandela. You can see the funeral memories at the top. The drawings were done by Chris, and we had to work. It was quite difficult because Chris was in Belgium, and I was in South Africa with the women. So we had to adopt a working methodology, because Chris came over to South Africa and he interviewed the women and recorded everything with some research students. And then he went back and he made the drawings based on what he had heard from the women. And then we made prints of his drawings and designs, and he sent it back to me in a gutter pipe, a huge, because the embroidery is 180 centimeters square. So he had to roll it and send it to me, and I cut it up into pieces, and every woman got a little piece with some threads, and they went home and they worked from home. And then twice a week, we'd meet them and check on the embroidery. I would email or scan and send the embroideries to Chris and see if it met with his approval, because he was the art director. I was just the go-between, giving advice and helping the women. So we worked like that for 2 years on those 2 artworks. And it's just a life generally. That top corner of the QR code is about the taxis, because public transport is minimal in South Africa, so people take taxis. And the taxi industry is a huge organization, and you can see there's a crowd of people at the bottom gathering together, because it's also a place for meeting. And then those are the 2 quilts based on the QR codes. Just generally, those are the quilts or the wall hangings that are on the exhibition here, and you can see them in the international exhibition with all the different. In the bottom corner over there is a portrait of Jacob Zuma and his craziness, and the women in the group refused to embroider that block, because in African tradition you dare not criticize the king. You just don't do that. So they would not embroider that, because they felt that it was a mocking of their king, even although during the interviews they complained a lot about their life conditions that they were hoping would improve. So we had to get another student who had a more blonde skin to actually embroider that block. So that is part of that work. Later on, we explained to them that we needed the block to complete the quilt, and it was accepted. Here are the ladies with all their names at the bottom, and the Belgian artists' names as well. And you can see these people have suffered incredible hardship. But wherever you go in South Africa, people are smiling and laughing. There's terrible crime, and yet when you're on the streets, you couldn't imagine it because the people are just so friendly. These people have had really hard lives. Unfortunately, oops, sorry, I have to go back. Lindiwe, who's sitting with me there in the last slide there, she had COVID, but she's recovered. But over here, this mama here, Clarence passed away, and so did her husband from COVID 2 weeks ago. So the group are in an absolute state because Clarence was like their queen. She was a strong leader and a very honest woman, and always polite, amazing woman. So they've been through another shock. And that is why they were so excited also to hear about the Biennale, because it's lifted them up again. Now, we have a cultural custom of storytelling and, of course, embroidery as well. And so the undervalued craft of embroidery has helped these women to tell their stories and empowered them and given them an authentic voice. And if you see here this square box, there are no facilities, or there's no money, so people use old shipping crates as concert halls. And they also use them for schools. And in that shipping crate is a traditional pop star wearing traditional clothing but playing an electric guitar. Those are the contrasts that you find in South Africa. On the side panels, you see Bishop Desmond Tutu, who's an amazing man. And on the other side is Nelson Mandela casting his first vote. These images were taken from a previous work that we'd done and reorganized by Chris and put into perspective so that they could flank the celebratory moment of that guitar player. Now, the women make commercial objects as well to sell, bags, and mostly for the tourist industry. And unfortunately now, there are no tourists because AIDS is at its high point in South Africa at the moment. And a wonderful thing happened. Years ago, a woman from Chile came to visit who has started in the meantime an embroidery project. And she did a raffle online and managed to raise funds out of embroidery and sent the money to these people. So that is what sewing can do for you. Then on a personal note, at the end of this project, Chris and I got married. Because we'd worked together so well on the project, we decided that, and we're not young, so we decided we can't play around, we'll just do it. So we'd actually seen each other 3 times. And we decided to get married because he came twice to South Africa. The university asked him to come back to lecture some more, and then our relationship started. And then we were on Skype a lot, and we got to know each other on Skype, so it's a very modern relationship. Now, the people do these commercial products, and they made this one especially for Portugal. And underneath somebody's chair is a green cloth like this. Please look to see whether it's under your chair. Okay, this bag is for you. With lots of Ubuntu. Ubuntu from Nomsandale. You always find the name of the embroiderer on the back. So there you are. Thank you very much. And we are privileged to be here. country because it's the Portuguese emblem. Okay, yeah. So you have a souvenir. Thank you very much. So you can look for it. Okay, I'll just close my computer.
Daniela.
History process.
No.
History?
Yeah, yes, that's one, yes. It has to go to the beginning. Maybe is this the beginning? I don't remember.
Yes, this is. There is no more. You just have to click here.
Here? And that's all? Here?
It's not working.
No, it's not connected. Thank you very much, Celia. It has been a very moving presentation. I'm sorry if it was a little bit strong for you sometimes. Now we are going to see another presentation sent from Chile by Daniela Contreras Flores. And she, unfortunately, she couldn't send her work for the exhibition because the work she's going to talk about was selected for the exhibition, but she couldn't send it. And the title of the presentation is History and Process, Record of a Trip, Aguasca Inte.
Hubo un tiempo donde no existían fronteras en América Latina. Hubo un tiempo donde los pueblos originarios habitaban esta pacha con su propia filosofía. Hubo un tiempo donde los textiles fueron el medio de comunicación. En ellos se plasmó la cosmovisión y la sabiduría de su entorno. Hubo un tiempo donde todo fue sagrado. ¿Se puede volver a ese tiempo? ¿Existe la posibilidad de retornar? ¿Se puede amar tanto algo que no se tuvo, pero que aún así está en tu sangre? La llegada de los españoles no significó la muerte de miles de indígenas, la violación de mujeres, la aparición de nuevas enfermedades, el saqueo de las tierras, el silenciamiento de nuestra cultura para imponernos una nueva con sangre. La llegada de los españoles no significó ser parias de nuestra propia tierra, pensando que lo mestizo y lo indígena carece de belleza, pensando que aquí la vida era salvaje, pensando que no teníamos cultura, pensando que acá no había arte, pensándonos siempre como inferiores frente a ese otro mundo que nos trajo todo lo que no teníamos y nos quitó gran parte de lo que éramos. Decía Pablo Neruda, se llevaron el oro y nos trajeron el oro, haciendo referencia a que los españoles se llevaron el metal, pero nos trajeron la lengua y las palabras que hablamos hoy. Pero, ¿de verdad el castellano es oro cuando acá existían cientos de lenguas? Lenguas que no tenían género, lenguas inclusivas, lenguas que tenían palabras para expresar la esencia de habitar este lado del mundo. ¿Es que acaso existe mejor lengua que la materna? No lo creo. ¿Y por qué necesitaría palabras escritas si existen textiles capaces de narrar toda la cultura? ¿Por qué? Si estos pueden hablar de los ciclos del cielo, las formas de cultivo, los dioses, contabilizar tierras, personas, comidas, ¿para qué las palabras escritas? ¿Puedes siquiera imaginar ese mundo? Hay tanta ignorancia en esa frase de Neruda como ignorancia nos trajo la conquista. Se robaron el oro y nos trajeron miseria. Miseria que ha hecho que 500 años de ese fatídico acontecimiento sigamos siendo prisioneros, esclavos con nuestros ojos colonizados. Esta idea de descolonizarnos no siempre fue clara en mí, aún es abstracta, pero el tiempo la ha provisto de forma y ahora tiene un cuerpo incipiente, un cuerpo que no he podido calzar con el lugar donde vivo. Santiago de Chile, una ciudad con más de 7 millones de habitantes, la más grande de mi país. Acá no hay vestigios latentes de ese pasado. Esas culturas no se palpan en las calles de cemento. Pero si yo hubiera nacido 500 años atrás, quizás hubiera sido inca o mapuche, porque esas fueron algunas de las culturas que tuvieron lugar en este valle, que ahora es pura contaminación, estrés, abuso político, represión. Perdón si no estoy siendo amable con mi país, pero la única arma que cargo es esta, es la de ser artista, y solo puedo decir por este medio la verdad que habita en mí. ¿Cómo puedes sentirte latinoamericano si tu entorno reniega de toda esencia del pasado? ¿Cómo, dentro de esta realidad neoliberal, capitalista y patriarcal? ¿Cómo? En Chile, cada día quedan menos personas pertenecientes a los pueblos originarios. Los mapuches son los que en mayor número han logrado resistir. Siglos y siglos de enfrentamiento, primero entre españoles y luego entre chilenos. Pero hoy, más que nunca, están siendo violentados. Los herederos de la tierra del sur de Latinoamérica ya no tienen tierra. Se las han robado para ser vendidas a inversionistas nacionales y extranjeros. Machi Celestino Córdoba, líder espiritual mapuche, ha usado estas palabras que creo son las más adecuadas para referirme a este tema. El Estado de Chile ha masacrado a los antepasados, ha generado el empobrecimiento espiritual, cultural y socioeconómico de la nación mapuche. Chile está matando y llevando a la cárcel a los herederos de la tierra. ¿Habrá justicia? ¿Existe justicia? ¿Cuál es su rostro? ¿Cómo ser chileno y entender la cultura ancestral? ¿Se puede? El 2017 viajé por primera vez a Perú y Bolivia. Ahí pude ver y palpar cómo ese pasado, esa filosofía andina, aún habita el espacio. Fueron 2 meses de viaje, durante los cuales fui fotografiando análogamente los paisajes y la gente. Entre guías turísticos, conversaciones con artesanos y personas del campo, visitas de museo y mercados de comida, fui descubriendo una historia que no sabía. Era la historia de los antiguos del cordón andino. Esa historia que también pertenece a Chile, aunque no se sienta en la capital. Es la historia de hace miles de años, porque en aquellos tiempos, donde no habían fronteras, los pueblos originarios se extendieron sin distinciones entre lo que hoy es Perú, Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, Argentina y Chile. En esa zona habitaron diversas culturas que compartieron formas de ver la vida, que compartieron lenguas, que compartieron tierra y que compartieron el lenguaje textil. Cuenta una de las tantas leyendas de esa zona que el dios Inti, dios Sol, y Mamaquilla, diosa Luna, enviaron a sus hijos, Manco Cápac y Mama Oclo, para fundar el Incario. Fue así como estos 2 seres nacieron en el lago Titicaca, actual Bolivia, y comenzaron su recorrido hasta llegar a las alturas de Machu Picchu para luego extenderse, incluso hasta llegar a Santiago de Chile. Cuando volví del viaje me di cuenta que esa leyenda estaba en mis fotos, solo que yo había hecho el camino al revés, desde Machu Picchu hasta el Titicaca. Así nace Registro de un viaje, Ahuasca Inti. Ahuasca, que significa telar, e Inti, que significa sol. Ambas palabras provienen del quechua, lengua viva que se ha utilizado desde antes del periodo inca y que hasta hoy sigue siendo utilizado por los habitantes del cordón andino. Esta obra textil hace referencia al deseo de seguir mostrando el lenguaje originario, que es parte de nuestro patrimonio cultural ancestral. Para esto he representado 5 elementos que, en mi opinión, son indispensables para comprender la esencia de esta cosmovisión. Por un lado, lo sagrado, representado por medio de una mesa ritual que se encuentra en la Isla del Sol en pleno Titicaca. La cosmogonía, representado por el portal entre la Tierra y el Sol que está en las ruinas del Valle Sagrado en Perú. Las mujeres, portadoras del conocimiento textil, quienes han llevado en sus manos durante siglos la memoria de los símbolos de su filosofía, para seguir narrando historias del pasado y del presente. Y para finalizar, la tierra y el cielo, que juntos conforman la Pacha, que es todo aquello que podemos percibir en el plano material y espiritual, y que nos muestran que el espacio y el tiempo son indivisibles. Cada uno de los 5 telares que forman parte de esta obra contienen estos símbolos tejidos en técnica de tapicería. Cuando aprendí esta técnica textil en la universidad, todos mis referentes fueron europeos. Durante ese tiempo pensé que esta técnica era exclusiva de ese lado del mundo. Me sorprendí con la historia de la tapicería medieval, con las representaciones religiosas y profanas, con la delicadeza de los detalles, con la obsesión por la reproducción de imagen. Y sin nunca haber visto uno de estos tapices en vivo, percibí su belleza con la nostalgia de no tener eso en mi cultura. Con el paso del tiempo, comencé a ver que hace cientos de años atrás, acá también se tejía tapicería. No con el imaginario europeo, obviamente, sino con el propio, uno que no estaba obsesionado con la mimesis, sino con la filosofía de su cultura. Uno que mediante la abstracción encontró un portal para manifestarse, como lo hicieron los artistas de las vanguardias, solo que cientos de años antes. Esta obra es un cruce significativo y genuino entre mi educación universitaria academicista y eurocentrista, y a su vez un deseo fulminante de entender las raíces de mi territorio, para poder responder en esencia a la pregunta: ¿qué somos en Abya Yala?
Well, another moving presentation. And now we will see the presentation by Dominika Krogulska-Kalska from Poland. Very different topic. Woven matter of belonging, textile mark, and artist identity.
Good morning. My name is Dominika Krogulska-Czekalska. I'm Doctor of Arts, and I'm both textile artist and designer, and textile design lecturer at the Strzemiński Academy of Arts in Łódź, at Decorative Textile Studio, where I explore the secrets and possibilities of jacquard structures, involving my students in inquiries and search for unconventional ways of application of this traditional and noble technology that is useful and sensual. My permanent reflection on the right way of creating new artifacts results in increased attention I pay to commenting on the surrounding reality and in my critical attitude, both as artist and designer. I am most willing to explore the field between disciplines, preferably critical but restorative in approach. I understand being part of an academy as an obligation to implement humanistic ideas, which is to accompany all my activities. Therefore, I wanted to create works that would not only provoke reflection or discussion about the form or the means used, but would transfer it to the level of ideas that I would like to talk about. The debate that I want to trigger would also concern the field of design itself, in my case, fabrics, its goals and mission. The mission that I have chosen for myself is to draw attention to moral and social problems through a medium which, due to its closeness to people, usefulness and location both in everyday life and spirituality, will become an effective carrier of the message I send. So-called engaged fabric with a humanistic approach in its visual narrative must resist the temptation to enslave with form and aesthetics, which should not dominate the message. Working on such a message is usually a long-term meditation and constant confronting with your inner self. The chosen technique determines a slow process. There is time for reflection and decisions. Technique conforms the narrative. I understand criticism as a commentary and self-reflection. In the picture, you can see my textile collection, which was followed by my thesis on the topic of textile as a medium of critical statement. If we imagine a situation in which everyone's demands are taken into account, I mean the multiplication of bands, it turns out that we are dealing with an absurd situation. This is the situation I'm trying to materialize and visualize through the first fabric, You Will Not Be. Let us also imagine a situation in which the same postulates are formulated in a different form, known from broad law, in the form of warnings. Still, the situation can be worrying. Fabric, be careful. If to complete the collection we add the most common and most widely postulated commands in our culture, we are dealing with a complicated image, which I believe requires cleansing and ordering. Fabric, you will be. Therefore, I propose the following solution. Meditation as a synthesis in which all prohibition disappear with a significant color. There are no orders or warnings. I do not suggest anarchy, but only the possibility of rethinking, which is to create a chance to reformulate the thesis, a chance to capture in words for one's own use the norm that organizes life. Fabric, irrelevant. Imagine there's no after John Lennon. The collection of vertical signs is supplemented by 4 secular prayer rugs related to 4 corners of the world and 4 trends related to the structure of goals and worldview: profane East, profane South, profane West, and profane North, all rugs. I choose the artistic means of building the narrative by analyzing the cultural competences of the average recipient. My goal is to reach with the message the widest possible audience. I hope that I can intrigue viewers, invite them to the world of my thoughts and messages, provoke them to contemplation or even meditation, and as the consequence, provoke change in thinking or even change in behavior. The primary impetus for designing my work was freedom. The message contained in the work concerns the medium of utility fabric burdened with a question mark, but also comments on the reality, plays a distracting role, but is supposed to sharpen alert awareness, lead to reflection, and refresh the view of the world. In the next series, present examples of the textiles were woven on a manually operated old jacquard loom, both a reminder and a remainder of the great textile industry which collapsed decades ago. The process of creating jacquard punched cards takes much time, so one has to be responsible and reasonable while making a decision about the height of the repeated pattern. The pattern in this textiles is just one row of rectangular shapes that form a regular grid when multiplied. LDZ, Lot's Woven City. The triptych is a tribute to the city where I have lived all my life. It was founded on the basis of developing textile industry, so the factory symbolizes its historical roots. The textile triptych was woven on a manually operated old jacquard loom dating back to the great days of the local textile industry, now mostly extinct. The linen yarn applied in the warp and wefts is a novel material traditionally used in Polish textile manufacturing in the past, since flax was widely cultivated in Poland. One of the linen threads used in the weft consists of harl splinters. The Polish for harl is paździerz. The word hard to pronounce by foreigners and moreover used by Poles themselves as a self-critical emblem of our national feature. The double structure of the cloth made it possible to create a kind of grid on which the message was cut out in the form of pictogram. LDZ is the short for lots commonly used in visual communication. The past meets the present on many levels: visual, material, and semantic. The three-part composition also refers to the past and tradition. One part is untouched by cutting interversion, the second one is the main image, signed on the third part. It's not easy being green in the city. The textile woven on a manually operated old jacquard loom, and again the double structure of the cloth allows to create a kind of grid on which it is possible to cut out the pictogram, the message. The cutouts form the word green, which is repeated in the thermic colors plus white, an artificial man-made color space basis used for printing all other colors by mixing cyan, yellow, magenta, and black on the white background. The only green yarn is woven into the background of the piece laying on the ground, and is overwhelmed by the grayness of the concrete of the city jungle. You are not allowed to forbid. The color codes of prohibition signs are related to the code that identifies the country that I live in, especially as a result of current changes. There are more and more bans in Poland. White and red is a set that rarely appears in the inhabited space, interiors, so when proposing such a set, I refer to a different than purely aesthetic order. My signs are personal, but they operate in a conventional system and can be universal, and I understand universality as the potentiality contained in them. I do not dare to forbid, and by juxtaposing a symbolic representation with an existing sign, I want to show the situation I observe. I do not have the power to remove the bans, but I cross them out in my work, suggesting such a possibility, an experiment. The search for personal freedom takes place in the world of visual messages that I materialize in the form of soft fabrics, blankets, carpets, textiles. The Polish language does not provide an English equivalent of the term comfort cloth, but what is missing in the language exists in the real world. Creating a pattern soft object, I want to cover and wrap my message around. Once again, I'm trying to make usable fabric more customizable to confront values with things. I'm a woman, but it's not my fault. Femininity suits me. I'm Polish, but it's not my fault. The nature within Poland moves me and gives me respite. Being in the world, borrowed from Heidegger, illustrates my basic concern, both as human being and artist. To communicate with the world, I use narrative and typotextiles. I follow the path where I come across signs, standards, rules, and regulations. I doubt, question, and propose my own. I'm a human being. I'm asking and looking for answers. I take the floor designing and creating. Thank you for your attention.
We go now to the first of our slow talks, slightly longer, with Giorgia Volpe.
Textile artist and designer and textile design lecturer at the Strzemiński Academy of Arts in Łódź at decorative.
Like here.
Now it is Ines.
Ines? She's not here?
No.
It's Giorgia Volpe. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Pardon. Yes. Giorgia Volpe from Canada.
Try again. Hello, everybody. I hope you are well. I'm Georgia Volpe from Sao Paulo and Quebec City. Actually, I live 20 years in Canada, in Quebec City, and I work here in my studio behind. First of all, I want to thank you, Contextile, and all the curators for inviting me to this exhibition, international exhibition, and for the second time. Unfortunately, because of the circumstance, I cannot be with you in presence. I try to share with you some notion of my work, as well as several images of different projects. So let's start. So my practice reflects a path driven by a desire to establish multiple, open, and diverse relationships between the artists and the society, between art and life. They are nourished by actions, stories, and objects that coming from the daily life. Through my work, I studied the relationship between the body and its environment by exploring transitions ideas, notable between the inside and the outside, the intimate and the public, the imaginary and the real. My path in public space is punctuated by a set of performative and collaborative interventions. It's the result from a reflection of my experience of the community and a recognition of the codes and the languages of the places of intervention. Each one of my projects in its way develops an experiential approach through manual skills, actions, and situations. I see each of my works as an organic element that invites passersby to rediscover the relationship they have with their environment. The action paid to the environment and the interrelationship that play out in it lead me to explore patterns, textures, and assemblages that reflect the multiple network that we collective wave. My projects revolve around the concept of interconnection, fluidity, and mobility. They are often inspired by textile, fractal, rhizomatic structure that act as interlacing that arising from the relationship between nature and culture. They allow me to reflect on the notion of the territory, identity, adaptability, diversity, crossbreeding, and social and cultural geographies. I am interested in sensory and imagery places of passage that reveal different forms of living and cartographies. My work involves local communities and their vision of territory. Open to the transmission, they often integrate material and symbolic manipulation in the process of accumulation of gesture. My project offers the participant the opportunity to reflect on their vision of original, socio-cultural, and human geographies based on the solidarity. Now, I would like to share with you some images of different projects. This project called The Fall, and it's all made with no biodegradable plastic bags. It was suspended in viaduct of the Quebec City. And the dimension is 5 meters by 15 meters. So all plastic cut and sealing together. This is the wind through the work. So the wind do several shapes on the air. Times given is installation in a specific site, all made in involve the performance, collaborative, participative work. It was made in the Granby city in the province of Quebec, in the old Farmer Sanctuary School of Girls. So this project recycled the nylon from the local industry and invited the student and the sister to embroidering the piece. And at the end, the piece, the curtain is hanging in the facade of the building. This building don't exist no more. Les jours s'en vont, je demeure is a poem from Apollinaire, all made with sheet and plaster hand, the proof, cut paper, 5 meters by 3 meters. This one is a work in progress that during maybe 80 years and involved collect VHS, HHS and audio tapes from different people. And I recycle in the performance, so I replay this piece before broken the audio tapes. Project all made with branches and recycled garment from this store, fashion store. So 3 tops. I collaborate with biologists and fishermen, real fishermen. The last fish they do, it was like a homage about this last fish, because the eel disappear of the river. So in background is the St. Lawrence River. So this the way of this fisherman fishing. So all tale of the different species of this river. C'est la coulée douce, an installation with a performative intervention in the forest, maple forest. All this material comes from also tubulation, recycled tubulation to the maple syrup, to collect the maple syrup. So I recuperate this material they use to produce the maple syrup, and I play with the ideas of mixing, métissage, and migratory passage. Took 4 years and placed in different environment around Quebec City and also in United States and Philadelphia. So it's a work also with publicitary and political banners woven together. The second presentation, the same boats with the lights lead, and here in the Philadelphia port with the background of the old boats and navire in this port. So work in progress, unfolding with braided plastic also and duct tapes. And the last Contextile in the Palacio das Flores with a cadence. They set up this work very well on the space. So now I want only show 3 less works, several images with 3 projects I did with collaboration and participation. This is a meeting point, a work in progress that took around 8 years, traveling around Quebec, and the people sometimes help to transport them because they become very big. The people can bring the plastic to braid together on the appropriate however they want. In the Musée des Beaux-Arts de Québec, so with also an integration in architecture. This is Hecho verso of the work. Some more intervention in the public space. So it's like a territory woven with the people and the passing by participation, and also the different community that make all several things to appropriate of this public space, create imaginary public space. So this is in the night. The second project I want to show you is the grand manufactory, and the project involves also sound and the participation of the public. So here's some image. This is a woven collective, and the all space is a big place in public space in Quebec. So it's all the work invited all the space, and the public coming and chew around and choose each one the table they want to invest in their time. So also they collaborate to weaving together and make the dream and captures, and collaborate to build the manufacturing life. The last one is a territory textile made with the farmers, women that used to work with crafts. So it's the first time for them to collaborate with contemporary arts. They invited me to create a piece and put their savoir-faire in collaboration. So this is the beginning of the project. I proposed them to choose really important places to have fun, to have in their history, in their territory. And so they choose the river, St. Charles River, in the neighborhood. So it's the center of the work. It's the line that link all piece we do. So I proposed them to transpose the map in this square and translate things we found in this environment, like the farmers, the rivers, the house, the street, and transpose in the piece of the textile, recycled textile. So here is a little how the hands work, and the street, the river. So I show them different way to transform the textile in the volume. And they also show me different shapes and different, almost for me, the more important in this project is for me, they show with very proud for them what is important for them in their territory. So we learn about a lot about memories and exchange and the traditional, and all these elements compose with this work. So at the end, here is the piece. We took 5 months to produce, and now is installed in the library, Félix Leclerc Library. So it's a permanent work in this building. It's all for today. I thank you so much, the whole team from Contextile, to keep going this extraordinary Biennial. I thank you for your attention. So I share with you my website and my Instagram address, and I hope hear from you one day. So take care. Oh, thank you. Bye.
And now we go to the last presentation during the morning. We welcome Inés Jorge from Portugal. and she will talk about sites of making, engaging with local contexts, communities, and memories through craft. Oops. It's a kind of, I'm useless with this. No, it's not so easy, huh?
So, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start by thanking everyone involved in the Contextile Biennial, or Biennial. I would also thank the Contextile team for allowing me to participate in the textile talks once again. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very nervous as well, but I think that's okay. And I will tell you a bit about my PhD project, specifically one part of this project that is about the post-industrial paradigm and how the post-industrial paradigm has given rise to a specific type of biennial and exhibition. Sorry, I keep saying biennial. That's okay too. It's biennial. So the first part of my presentation, I will address post-industrial heritage as a context for craft revival. And in the second part, I will focus on the Contextile Biennial as a case study in my PhD project, in this context of an exhibition that directly interacts with local contexts, communities, and memories related to specific histories of making. So, between the 18th and 20th centuries, we witnessed the period of industrialization, specifically in Western countries. And this includes the Industrial Revolution between around 1750 and 1850. During this period, several handmade practices were industrialized, practices that already existed in specific regions of the world. Most of them were industrialized. And about this period, craft historian Glenn Adamson talks about the fact that our current perception of craft emerged in this period of the Industrial Revolution. By then, craft started being conceived as the opposite of industry. That is the conception that somehow still lasts today in our ideas, in our common ideas. This period of industrialism was followed by post-industrialism, which reached the developed countries from 1970 to 1990. And this period had a great impact on areas which had a strong industrial activity. There was a need to revitalization for urban regeneration, and therefore we arrive at where we are today, at the post-industrial paradigm. So in these urban regeneration initiatives that try to give a new role to the cities, especially the post-industrial cities that lose their function as industrial spaces, lots of abandoned factories and other buildings, we include, or I am including, the emergence of the biennial. In fact, several authors talk about biennialization and the biennial phenomenon as a reflection in itself of the post-industrial paradigm, of the need to revitalize cities through culture industries. So throughout these periods, craft becomes connoted with notions of place, of memory, of heritage, of trauma, of skill, and even relational practice. So what I'm arguing here is that the post-industrial paradigm has given rise to a specific typology of biennial, which I call the material-based post-industrial biennial, a very short and simple name, as you can see. And here you can see my research questions that are guiding me and that I will somehow try to address very briefly in this talk. So I'm using Contextile as a case study, one of my case studies. And I'm asking, how does this particular type of biennial engage with places, venues, communities, and memories linked to specific heritages of craft? How does it negotiate the art canons, the canons of art, such as the divide between craft and art and industry, or the traditional definition of craft as a set of disciplines? How does it challenge or reiterate the conventional roles of artist, curator, and public? How does it reflect the voices of local communities? And ultimately, this is perhaps the ultimate question for me, how craft is defined? How is craft defined through this particular type of exhibition? So in terms of place and looking specifically to the Contextile Biennial, the Biennial emerged in the context of Guimarães' nomination as European Capital of Culture in 2012. And in itself, this program of the European Capitals of Culture is a European Union program, you must know it, which is in itself based on initiatives of urban regeneration, of strengthening local communities, of cultural tourism, and ideas of shared history and heritage amongst European countries. So actually, this program of Guimarães European Capital of Culture was inserted in these initiatives of urban regeneration. It was very important, and perhaps it still is, to reimagine the city by reimagining textiles, to reaffirm the place of textile in the Portuguese industry and at an international level. In terms of space, Contextile works across 3 different types of space: living sites, production sites, and exhibition sites. So living sites include the cities themselves, the surrounding regions, and also public spaces like squares or public washing tanks or gardens. Production sites or making sites include factories, companies, workshops, places where things are made and produced. In terms of exhibition sites, of course, they include museums and galleries and cultural spaces. So what happens with Contextile is that it juxtaposes these different kinds of sites. And in fact, the post-industrial city is already a palimpsest, a juxtaposition of sites. So by using a public space as an exhibition space to make an intervention, we are mixing different types of sites. In terms of community, I will try to show you, if I have time, that several Contextile projects work in partnership with local organizations and often involve the specific communities related to these organizations, such as factories, for instance. In terms of memory, you can see on the right side of the slide a quote by Adelina Pinto, Councillor for Education and Culture for the City Council of Guimarães. And here she explains that very beautifully, that textiles have shaped the city of Guimarães. They have shaped the city, the surrounding region, and its people. So oftentimes, Contextile's projects, their exhibitions, there are several projects, have acknowledged textiles as a source of trauma, but also as a source of healing, I believe. So now I will talk about 3 types of Contextile projects, the first of which are public arts interventions, which use living sites as exhibition sites. So these are interventions where works are made by broader audiences in the public space and exhibited in the public space as well. So not so much directed to specific communities, but broader audiences that are involved in the making of a collective piece of textile art. Unlike other textile projects, they are not led by artists, but are usually mediated by the Contextile team. They incorporate the textile medium in contemporary practices, such as performance, installation, socially engaged art, and even craftivism. And they use traditional textile techniques in contexts that challenge historical assumptions about craft, such as the association between craft and femininity and the domestic space. In the end, and I am concerned about how craft becomes displayed and defined through the exhibition, I would say that these projects display craft as key in the city's economy and social life, and as a vehicle to communicate. Artistic residencies are the second type of project. They work across production and exhibition sites. So usually the artists come here to work, usually in a factory or in a company or in a workshop. They involve the workers in the making of a piece, textile workers, artisans, etc. So contemporary approaches are crossed with the traditional techniques. So in artisanal, and industrial practices become mingled. There is no distinction between them. These communities often end up being engaged not only in the making process, but also in the theme. So often their memories, their ideas become inserted in the project in itself. What I found that is also interesting is that by inserting, it is the artist status that allows their voices to become included in the work and in the exhibition. So it is interesting to see this idea of legitimization of through the artist's status and through the exhibition itself. So here we see craft displayed as a practice that crosses all kinds of boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, cultural boundaries. They intersect personal and collective memories, sometimes the memories of the artists and the people themselves that are participating in the project, and also, again, as part of the city's heritage. Last type of projects, which are also artistic residencies, but they are from a particular partnership, which is also a program co-funded by Creative Europe, which is Magic Carpets. Magic Carpets residencies, in particular, are usually about socially engaged projects, intercultural dialogues, intergenerational dialogues, and usually artists engaged with the local communities where they go. So what has often happened with the Magic Carpets residencies in Contextile, is that the artists end up exploring alternative readings about the region of Val do Ave in Guimarães, the textile medium, and the textile heritage. These projects often take the form of collaborative research projects that foster the sharing of knowledge and experiences between artists and participants. And in the end, I believe that craft becomes displayed as a political and interdisciplinary tool which enables a reflection about social issues. So to conclude, I tried to tell you a bit about the emergence of material-based post-industrial biennials in response to the post-industrial paradigm. I focused on Contextile as a case study which emphasizes the textile medium, but at the same time, it highlights the interdisciplinarity of craft and its dialogues with industry and art. I tried to show you a sufficiently wide range of formats, of exhibition formats, which often engage people, places, communities, and memories linked to local textile heritage. I tried to show the unconventional relations that some contextile projects are able to achieve between artists, curators, and audiences, and the idea of legitimization of invisible voices or people through the artist's status and the exhibition medium. And finally, I believe that contextile projects display craft as a vehicle for healing, for reintegrating heritage practices, sites, communities, and narratives in the contemporary urban life. So this is the bibliography. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ines. And now we were supposed to have a conversation among us, but we are a little bit late. So we will have more time in the afternoon, and now we need to go to have lunch. Thank you. But we promise we have more time later in the afternoon to talk.